Dave and I had been married for about 4 years when we decided it was time to expand our little family. I met Dave at a deposition at the health insurance company I worked for. He was the lead attorney for the plaintiff, and I was one of the henchmen defending the defendant. Dave was and remains a brilliant lawyer, fast on the path of a partnership that is destined to earn millions in the pursuit of justice. Although I am a competent lawyer, I will not claim to belong to his class, and therefore was surprised to hear from him shortly after the lawsuit was settled. I quickly discovered that at numerous dinners, courtships, drinks, dances, and events, he was a witty and charming companion. Marriage followed, and we settled into one of those ubiquitous gated communities that seem to sprout like weeds all over Long Island. Anyway, for wealthy people who have a few million to buy a 4-bedroom ranch that was too expensive in price and too big for the two of us. But we had a lot to grow, and we had a place for an au pair in case I wanted to go back to work. Like many privileged couples, we lived the American dream with more money than a young couple could reasonably expect, and at times it seemed like the only problem we faced was the number of hours Dave worked. Although we were both lawyers, my job was more like a 9-to-5 office job, while he spent a lot of time looking for an almighty partnership. So I often had to attend the endless gatherings, barbecues, dinners, wine tastings, and neighborhood gatherings that life in a gated community entailed. It was during numerous meetings of this kind that I became friends with Joanna and, accordingly, with her husband Walter. This couple intrigued me, and since I had free time, I was on vacation in the last month of pregnancy and decided to find out what I could. No, I didn't hire a private investigator and didn't dig into their personal lives. I just became friends with Joanna, since she didn't work and lived just 2 houses away from us. I was intrigued. It was a mystery. Walter, as I understood it, was a certified public accountant and had his own small firm. Strangely enough, unlike some of the other businessmen in the neighborhood, he never seemed to be looking for a new business or trying to make connections. He looked like an accountant, in his early 40s, balding, a little overweight, although I wouldn't call him fat. He didn't look like he'd ever had an athletic body, just a bookish, nerdy personality type, about 5 feet 8 inches, and he often had slightly detached or confused manners. He never seemed to fit in completely with the guys. He didn't play golf, fish, or drink, nor was he the stereotypical alpha male that swarmed our small community. He also seemed, oddly enough for a married man, somewhat shy in the presence of women. Always polite, always a gentleman, but without flaunting it, he mostly blended in with the woodwork. Joanna, on the other hand, was beautiful, lively, cheerful, flirtatious, about 35 years old, but she looked younger and was completely devoted to Walter. She had a smile that made the Mona Lisa feel ashamed, a body that on my best day I could never hope to compete with. I've only seen her angry twice. Once when some men made fun of Walter in her presence, and she verbally chewed them so that they slipped away with their tails between their legs, and another time when one of the local Lothario tried his tricks on her. I think he was happy to escape with his testicles intact, but she made it clear, loudly and publicly, that if he or anyone else tried to do it again, there would be immediate pain. What she had was meant for Walter and no one else. She was clearly, sometimes nauseatingly, in love with Walter. It was obvious to all of us, except, oddly enough, perhaps Walter himself, who for some reason seemed slightly indifferent to all this. He clearly loved her, treated her wonderfully and with respect, seemed completely devoted to her, but was stupid enough to miss the clues the rest of us saw. Or maybe after living with it for so long, he just accepted it as natural. Like I said, they lived 2 houses down, so they had the money to live here. But it didn't seem like they had the toys that were so conspicuous in the rest of the neighborhood. The cars were ordinary, nothing special. There were no boats in the courtyard, number 90-inch television screens, no rooms with mahogany grills that others boasted about. They had a nice yard with a swimming pool, a barbecue of the usual size, as in most of the houses here, but nothing ostentatious. I've never heard her complain that she's tight on money, but she certainly wasn't into the latest designer fashions. She didn't wear much jewelry, a modest but decent engagement ring, a gold wedding ring, and the ubiquitous pair of gold earrings that looked exactly like 2 small top hats. I think they had money for toys. There was just no need to compete by showing them off. They had 2 children, a 6-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. Both were small, sweet, well-mannered, and their mother and father obviously doted on them. They had a Spanish-speaking girl who watched over them, something like a combination of a maid and a babysitter, as well as Joan, who stayed at home as a mom. But even so, they were perfectly normal. I realized that my son attended one of the best private schools in the area, but nothing special, since he was only 6 years old. Mom drove him to school and picked him up after it. Dad was at work, and the babysitter looked after the children. At that time, I was about 8 months pregnant, and I took a vacation from work. I used to walk every morning to try to get some exercise, although I stayed pretty close to home, so I went out early when I saw Joan leaving to take her son to school. We chatted for a while, and I invited her for coffee after she got home. She had planned the whole morning to take her son, go to the gym, then go shopping, but she promised to come in around lunchtime, have coffee and chat. I knew there was some story that was just waiting to be told, but I didn't expect to hear it today. I was wrong. Joanna came in a little later, and we were sitting drinking coffee and chatting about pregnancy and children in general when I asked her if she was planning to have more children. It depends on Walter. Whatever he wants, I will do. If he wants more, we will have more. If not, then no. I noticed that she was twirling her little gold earring with her fingers as she said this, a nervous habit that I had seen her have several times when something touched Walter. Of course, you should also take part in making this decision. I mean, this is not the 19th century. He can't make you get pregnant. No, Walter would never do that. He's really sweet, and I couldn't have hoped for a nicer man to marry. It's not like he's ever going to make me do anything. It's just that I'll do anything, anything at all, to make sure he's happy, and that includes having kids, not having kids, or whatever he wants. You really love him that much, don't you? We've all seen how you treat him like he's God's gift to women, and you've won a prize for how you treat him. To be honest, I had never seen anything like it until I met you too. And yet at times he seems a little ignorant, as if he doesn't understand what you're doing for him. And I hope he never understands, she said, twirling the earring again. I looked at her a little intently, as it was strange to hear. Don't you want him to know how much you love him? It's not so much that, but that, it's a little hard to explain. Let me ask you a question, Roberta. You're a lawyer. If I told you something, could you keep it a secret, like a lawyer for a client? I could if you hired me. Are you in some kind of trouble? Is Walter hurting you or threatening you? No, nothing like that. It's just that I have a story that I want to tell, and I'd like to tell it to someone, just in case, but no one should know about it. What do I need to do to hire you? It's quite simple. Just give me something, for example, $10 as an advance, and we can conclude an oral contract establishing attorney-client confidentiality. She grabbed her purse, pulled out a 20, handed it to me and smiled. Consider yourself hired. I grew up on Long Island, but not in this part of it, she began. My father was a roofer, and he spent half of what he earned at the bar. So we never had a lot of money. Mom worked as a hairdresser and brought some things home, but we definitely belonged to the lower class, nothing like this neighborhood. Because of his drinking, cheating, and their quarrels, it's amazing that I graduated from high school, but I graduated and managed to spend some time at secretarial school. I was working at a lousy agency, doing paperwork and short-term assignments, when I met Walter. His secretary was on maternity leave, and they hired me to replace her. So I was kind of second fiddle. When was that? Only about 10 years ago. I was 24, and I had had enough of partying and started looking around for someone to start a family with. I admit that I was a bit of a mercantile little fool. My idea was to get a wealthy husband for a few years, and then move on with a decent income, and Walter seemed to be perfect for this. He was 32 then, 8 years older than me, and he was even more ignorant and inexperienced than he is today. I didn't think he was rich, but he had his own business, a nice apartment in a nice area of the city, and he seemed perfect for the role of an initial husband. I started dating him after my time in his office ended, and soon moved in with him. We got married about a year later. Walter was sweet and compliant, and I thought I could control him as much as I needed to. He was also completely trusting and never asked for a prenuptial agreement. I'm not proud of being a gold digger, but I won't regret it either. And yet you're here, 10 years later, and you're still happily married. Yes, it is. We had a pretty normal engagement. My only condition for marrying him was that I wanted a home, a real home that we could call our own. I've lived in rented apartments all my life. So, we looked around and chose the one we have now. I thought it was a little expensive, but Walter wanted a place for children, And although I had no intention of having children, I didn't want to disappoint him before the wedding. The good news for me was that he didn't even blink when he saw the price, and he had no problem putting my name on the document. However, shortly before we got married, there was an event that, although I did not attach any real importance to it at the time, I later realized that this was probably the most significant event in my life. What was that? A few weeks after our engagement, Walter said he wanted us to have dinner with his old school friend. We went to a small restaurant that I had never been to in Little Italy, one of those quiet family places, but upscale. When we entered, I had a strange feeling, as if you were just entering someone's house, and not a public place where no one cares about you. Walter had a quick chat with the head waiter, told him who we were meeting, and everything changed. We were shown to the best table, and 5 minutes later the host was there with a free bottle of his best wine. The service after that was just amazing. We had 2 waiters all the time, and we hardly needed to do more than blink before they were at the table. We had eaten most of the dinner, and Walter's friend still hadn't shown up, when 2 big men came in and seemed to look around the entire restaurant. Then one left, and the other took a seat a little behind us. Then the first one returned with 2 other men, one of whom was very well dressed and about the same age as Walter, and the other much older. Walter stood up, hugged them both, and introduced me to his friend Tony and Tony's grandfather Salvatore. These 2 didn't look like Walter at all. I asked him about it later, and he claimed Tony was just an old school friend of his. In any case, they didn't stay long. The old man made a short toast, and they drank to the success of our wedding. Tony gave me an early wedding present, a beautiful pair of diamond earrings that I later valued at $10,000, and everyone hugged before they left. Neither of them came to the wedding, and I didn't see Tony for another 2 years. So, as they say, life went on. In my excitement about the wedding, moving in, buying furniture, and arranging our house, I completely forgot about this dinner. Walter went to work every day, but he never seemed so ambitious. I asked him several times if he wanted to attract new customers and expand his business, but he said he preferred what he had. Money was never a problem. I had no idea how much he actually had, but he never complained about the price of what I wanted to buy, no matter how high it was. So, are you settled in marital bliss? Let's just say that we have settled into family life. Walter is a sweet, kind, gentle man, but sometimes a girl wants a little more than tenderness in the bedroom. When I was dating before the wedding, I had a few guys who liked to ride me hard, and it just wasn't Walter, and to be honest, I missed it. At that time, I wasn't ready to give up on marrying Walter, at least not until I had at least some idea of what he was worth. So I knew I had to be careful, but there was a need for something brighter. I wasn't going to do anything at home. There are too many prying eyes in our neighborhood. So I signed up for the gym. I really wanted to train and keep my body in shape, but I didn't forget to hire a nice personal trainer. He was half Italian, about 6 feet 1 inch tall, and his body was as hard as metal. We entered into a wonderful romance, meeting at hotels several times a week to spend the day having fun and playing games. His stamina was incredible, and he gave me what I was missing. So you had an affair. Did Walter ever find out about this? No, he never knew, but it really ended amazingly badly, in a way that is simply impossible to imagine worse. One day Walter had to work for 2 days and 2 nights, so Chris and I decided to rent a hotel room for the night. We had never done this before. We usually just took an hour or 2 during the day, so this was supposed to be a new treat for both of us. I don't remember much. I think we were both drugged in some way. It's just that sometime in the evening, some strong men pushed us into a car and drove us to a remote warehouse. I know Chris was in the business of selling steroids or something, so I assumed it was related to that, and I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it didn't look good. You mean you've been kidnapped? What happened? How did you get out of this, and did Walter find out? I noticed that her voice seemed to take on an even monotone tone as she told me this story, as if she was distancing herself from everything that was happening. Between that and the details she told, it was a little unnerving. When the effect of the banned substances ended, I found myself tied to a chair. They used bandages to wrap my arms and legs so they wouldn't leave any marks, plus wrapped some more around my mouth so I couldn't scream. For some reason, they were especially careful not to tag me in any way. Chris, on the other hand, was handcuffed and hung by his wrists with a rope that was tied to a beam near the ceiling. My chair was facing him. 2 men came out and roughly tore off his clothes, tearing his shirt around his handcuffed wrists. They spread a large piece of plastic wrap under him and started beating him, over and over, with big heavy chains. I saw blood splattering the film and dripping from his wrists where the handcuffs cut into him when they beat him. They just kept beating him while he screamed over and over again. She paused for a moment and shuddered before continuing in the same even tone. After a while, Chris stopped screaming, I think. Fortunately, he lost consciousness. His body was covered in blood. One ear had partially come off. His nose was flattened and blood was still dripping from it. His eyes were swollen and closed. A forklift truck pulled up with two 55-gallon barrels on a pallet and some kind of bolt cutter with a long handle. They pulled Chris up higher and put one of the barrels under him. Then one of the men put on a bolt cutter. I remember the blood spurting when they fell into the barrel. They must have let go of the rope, and when Chris fell into the barrel, they closed the lid and hammered it in. Then they rolled up the film, put it and the cutter in another barrel, and took them away. A few minutes later, the loader returned with two new barrels. I remember thinking I was going to be next, and I passed out. I just sat and listened, fascinated by her story. I had never heard such a story before, and even in my wildest dreams, I did not expect such a turn of events. She continued. A little later, I woke up, still tied to the chair. There was another chair in front of me, and Walter's friend Tony was sitting on it. He told one of the men to remove the bandage from my mouth and one arm. I just sat there, frozen, and stared at him. He pulled a flask from under his coat and handed it to me. I remember sucking on it and coughing a little. Whatever it was strong, but I needed it. It was cold where we were, and I wasn't fully dressed, and the alcohol warmed me up from the inside. Tony began to speak in a smooth, soft voice. Joanna, we're going to have a little talk, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Can you do this for me, Joanna? If you do, we'll forget about it soon, and you can come home safe and sound. I just nodded at him. Does Walter know about this man you've been seeing? No, I don't think so. I tried to make sure he never found out. Is there any chance that this man made you pregnant? No, I'm taking pills. I'm not ready to have children yet. Does Walter know you're on birth control? No. Do you love your husband, Joanna? Do you think you can make him happy? Yes, I know, and yes, I know that I can make him happy. I'm so sorry that this happened. I just needed to. He raised his hand and stopped me. I'm not sure if you know this, but your husband is one of the most gorgeous people I know. If he wanted to, he could become a brilliant writer or scientist. He's a genius in finance. However, he has a small office and apparently very few clients. These clients include my family, as well as some of our friends and business partners. We also provide his services for a fee to several cartels that do their business in our country. But despite these abilities, or maybe because of them, Walter is a bit strange. We understand this and just want to see him happy. There are many people who want to see him happy, and they are willing to go to extreme measures, as you could see today, to make sure that this happens. We think you can help make him happy. I know I can make Walter happy. I really love him. Let's not have any secrets between us. I talk to Walter a lot, and he totally loves you. He sees you as the perfect wife and mother of his children, and I don't want to see him disappointed. We both know you're a gold digger, but what you don't know is that Walter has a lot more gold than you ever imagined. But if you try to get it, there will be too many people who will be upset about it for you to ever be able to enjoy the moment. After a while, my friends will make sure that you get home safely. Walter won't even need to know about this little incident. Wait a month to make sure, then throw out the birth control pills and give Walter the kids he wants. Can you do that for me? Yes. I hope I never see you again, because if I do, you're definitely not going to like it. There are 1,000 ways for you to die, from a car accident to a robbery, and Walter will never know the real reason. Just know that before that you will spend time here in hell. Never give me a reason to talk to you again. Never give me a reason to think that you're doing something that could cause Walter unhappiness. We both just sat in silence. I was too shocked to speak, and Joanna was probably too excited about what she had told me. Then she finished the story. Walter never knew about what happened. I didn't let him know. I spend every moment of every day trying to please him, as if my life depends on it, because that's how it is. About a month after that, I received a box in the mail. Inside were the earrings that you see on me, and a postcard with Tony's signature. I wear them every day to remember. "What are these earrings?" She took one off and handed it to me. There, in perfect miniature, a gold 55-gallon barrel was cast,